Welcome, everyone. So, we've been talking a bit about working conditions, living conditions among the poor, some delays in reform, some early attempts at reform. In this video, I want to talk about Marxist communism, which is another response to the problems associated with the Industrial Revolution. So you may have heard of Karl Marx before. He's a pretty famous person. His first big work, which is written with Engels, is the Communist Manifesto, which is published in 1848. And in this, he first outlines his major set of ideas for what needs to change in order to create a better society. I want to go over some of his main ideas in this video. So, first of all, and one of the most important for Marx, is that economics is the foundation of all societies. Basically, whoever controls the money controls and shapes the world that keeps them in power. For Marx's time, then, that would be the industrial owners, the important upper middle class people. And so they have created a political system in which they have power. They've created an economic system that favors them. They have all these kind of cultural ideas. The middle class in the 19th century Victorian period is really shaping values and what is popular and what you should and should not do. And all of that is based on money and control of the economy. He also looked back and not so much used as abused history to try to prove his ideas. He thought that if you looked back in history, all history was class struggles. That you had the different classes, the middle and the upper class for a while, who were fighting for control. And basically what happens is that each economic system creates the group that overthrows it. So if you think about the Middle Ages, you had the upper class lords who controlled the economic system, but they needed to sell things because of the fact that that was how they earned their money, was off of the land. But they weren't going to go traveling around. So that meant that you saw the rise of the merchant class, the middle class. They're the ones who sold things. And eventually, especially as we moved towards 1750, you began to see that middle class rise. And in the 1800s, and early 1900s, they're overthrowing that upper class. When we move then to capitalism, he saw again that society was being divided. So you had the bourgeoisie, who are the industrial owners, this upper middle class. And then you have the proletariat, which that's his name for the working class. So we have the same issue here. Factory owners are not working on the floor of the factory. They need workers. And so the whole Industrial Revolution is producing more and more workers. And so Marx believed eventually the workers would rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie. So we have this kind of pattern. Each economic system creates the group that overthrows it. Now, in capitalism, then, Marx believed that the bourgeois was doing everything it can to stay in power. And so it really pushed ideas like laissez-faire capitalism. Of course, there's not supposed to be any government interference to provide better working conditions or shorter hours, because that is exactly what the bourgeois didn't want. And so the bourgeoisie is creating all kinds of educated experts who are producing this. Marx thought that the proletariat would be more cooperative, that they would work together. And I'll talk about why in just a second. But everything that was in the bourgeois values, the whole society, was pushing the idea that actually competition was what you needed. That's how you got ahead. You ingrain that into the school system from an early age. And that's how you kind of shape things. And I also talked a little bit about some of the ideas that are even coming out of the church in this period. All of that shaping these values. So according to Marx, what's the solution to the horrific conditions in the factory system? Well, basically what's going to happen is the workers need to organize as a group and overthrow the bourgeoisie, because the bourgeoisie are a tiny minority. Now, this would mean that the proletariat needs to understand that they have more in common with working class people in other countries than they do with the middle class in their own. So a worker in the United States, a worker in England, a worker in France are all being exploited, and they need to see that connection with each other. The problem is the bourgeoisie are pushing nationalism. They're trying to say, oh, no, 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 if you're French, you don't have anything to do with the British. We don't like the British. Or if you're American, you don't like the Germans. So Marx would say that's another way the bourgeoisie is trying to keep people separate. But according to him, as conditions continue to be horrible and awful in the factory systems, the workers would create this class consciousness and they would band together and eventually overthrow the bourgeoisie. Now remember, economics is the foundation of society. So if you change the economic system, then you could really change society. So for him then, this new society would be based on one where the majority prospered. Now, Marx is not from the working class, he's middle class, so he's looking from the outside. And he's looking at the workers, and he says, how do these people even survive with these horrible conditions? And his answer is, they work together, they support each other. If I'm a mother who has young children, but I have to work in the factory, then I'm hopefully going to find maybe a grandmother who can't work in the factory anymore. And she'll help watch my kids. I'll work and I'll help her. The only way we survive is to work together as the working class. And so our inherent values are cooperation and the fact that we all rise and fall together. And so our economic system would be one where we would redistribute the wealth so that everyone prospered. This is what Marx is saying from the outside. Therefore, we would create, out of this economic system in which everyone prospered, we would create new society values of cooperation in which everybody was valued, in which we understood that we ultimately make much more progress when we work together. And everyone is valuable, whether that is the manager of a mill or the average worker, whether that is the university professor or the person who works in plant services. If we don't work together, we're not going anywhere. So we're going to push that in our literature, in our educational system, and everything. And most importantly, this would create democracy. For Marx, a communist economic system produces democracy because democracy needs equality. And for Marx, economic equality. So I realized that in the 20th century, all of the examples of Marxist communism turned into dictatorships in which power was controlled by a small group of people. But that's not actually Marx's long-term vision. They didn't go the way it was supposed to go. It really is supposed to pair with democracy. I think Marx would look at our world today and he would say, yeah, you all have the vote, but we know money runs things. If you have a little bit more money, you can pay the lobbyists. If you have more money, the justice system is a little different for you, right? This is the way where just getting the vote, all that happened is you got the vote, but you didn't change the economic system. And so you didn't really change people's ability to speak into the system. So for Marx, this is why you need to have the bourgeoisie overthrown to create this new society of equality in which everyone makes about the same amount of money, and therefore you could really create a system of democracy and prosperity.